BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia at heart and from around the globe. And hello everybody, today is Friday, another Cooper Friday. Welcome to the show. How's everybody doing? On Fridays this year, I've been talking to you guys about D.B. Cooper, the man responsible for the only unsolved skyjacking in U.S. aviation history. My name is Ned DeHaan and I am your host. On Thanksgiving Eve in 1971, D.B. Cooper skyjacked a plane that was in the Pacific Northwest, and he held the crew and passengers hostage, demanded $200,000 in cash as ransom and 4 parachutes, and then D.B. Cooper parachuted into the night somewhere over the Pacific Northwest, never to be seen again. Well, at least not under the persona of Dan Cooper, which he used to purchase the ticket and board the plane. D.B. Cooper was a pseudonym that was falsely given to him by the media. As previously stated, he used the name Dan Cooper. And there are several different D.B. Cooper suspects that are given some strong consideration. And there are also multiple composite sketches that have been drawn that feature the perpetrator. And one thing I began to notice is some of the suspects match certain details of the composites, others do not, and some match details of multiple composites. Now, I've stated on some previous Cooper Friday episodes that I think at least one of them is going to be very strongly accurate, because people spent a very large amount of time with D.B. Cooper. They had a lot of time to analyze his appearance or just to remember certain details of his physicalities, whereas with something like the Zodiac Killer mystery, that's the one that I always go to, the witnesses really didn't get a lot of time to see the Zodiac Killer. But another example that should be brought up should be the Golden State Killer mystery, and this is one thing that I think is even more valuable because the Golden State Killer has been identified, Joseph D'Angelo, and what I always say is that every single composite sketch of the Golden State Killer had some similarities to D'Angelo, but none of them were perfect. One of them is about as close as one of them is closer than the others, but say, for example, one captured the eyes, one captured the jawline a little bit more. So with the D.B. Cooper story, I think that it's fairly similar, that one of them is going to be extremely accurate, and then some of them are going to capture certain details and similarities in a better way. And I would like to thank Norjack.org for the images that have been posted online, and they've also simplified it a little bit. I'm going to be referring to them as Initial Sketch, Composite A, Composite B, and Composite C. And I'll even throw something in about the age-altered D.B. Cooper composite at the end. And I want to be clear, there are multiple variations of the composites. There were numerous variations of Composite B, but I'm just going to call it Composite B for this discussion. Now, with the Initial Sketch, I think that this is the only one that even closely resembles the D.B. Cooper suspect, Walter Reca. Walter Reca is a different type of D.B. Cooper suspect because he actually confessed to the crime. He's on tape confessing to the crime, laid out everything, explained everything, how he did it and why he did it, what he was thinking when he did the skyjacking. But I don't think for a second that any of that is true. And a big reason is that it just seemed that all of the physical descriptions do not seem to match Walter Reca. But when I saw the initial composite sketch, I had to say that there is the smallest, almost like 25% resemblance, whereas composites A, B, and C would get an absolute zero. I mean, Walter Reca has a very different nose shape, he has a very different hairline, and on one of them, perhaps I should take it back, there is some similarity to his jawline, but other than that, I think that he looks extremely different, and also, he was 100 miles away from where D.B. Cooper's flight path should have taken place, a place called Cleveland, Washington, and, I mean, it sounds like he was just some guy walking in the rain on the night that D.B. Cooper committed the skyjacking, and I don't think that Walter Reca was D.B. Cooper. But again, if you want to dispute anything, put your ideas in the comment section down below. With Composite A, I think that there are 2 D.B. Cooper suspects that strongly match this, and they are Kenny Christensen and Sheridan Peterson. With Sheridan Peterson, I did a standalone episode on him, and I said that I actually think that he looks like all of the different composites blended into one, but I also said that there is a very, very strong resemblance between him and Composite A. I mean, it's not only the massive forehead, but I mean that this is talking about comparing facial similarities. And yes, the forehead is very bold in Composite A, as it is with Sheridan Peterson, and perhaps the most famous photo of him, the nose shape, the jawline. And one thing that I've noticed with Composite A is that D.B. Cooper's ears seem to extend upward and outward, almost at an angle. And I do see some of that with Sheridan Peterson, but I see that even more with Kenny Christensen. Kenny Christensen is a suspect whom I've talked about on the channel because I had the opportunity to interview Jeremy Berthiaume, who is the author of a Zodiac Killer books called So I See You Don't Paint Houses, but he has also followed the D.B. Cooper mystery, and his D.B. Cooper suspect is Kenny Christensen, and during the interview, he fully admits that not all of the observations are his. He cites the book Into the Blast by Skip Porteous and Robert Blevins throughout the interview, and he's giving credit where credit is due. But their suspect, Kenny Christensen, is somebody that has a very similar face shape and also a very similar nose shape. And this is something that I do not see with a lot of other D.B. Cooper suspects when they are compared to Composite A. Now, I will admit that Kenny Christensen has a larger nose than Composite A, but it's relatively the same shape. And this is something that I noticed the first time that I saw that D.B. Cooper composite. And yes, I think Composite A is the most widely distributed image of D.B. Cooper. I mean, it's the one out of all the other composites that is shared most frequently. And I just began to think that that composite sketch has an extremely narrow nose. Like if you were look at the bridge of the nose and just look how it goes down, it's almost unnaturally narrow. That's always bothered me. And you can see it when you look at the other D.B. Cooper suspects. I don't think anyone quite has a nose that narrow out of any of them. But with Kenny Christensen, he has the same shaped nose, an almost identical nose, except it's larger in proportion. But that is just my take on the subject. And yes, there are numerous reasons why you might think that's Sheridan Peterson or Kenny Christensen was not D.B. Cooper. Sheridan Peterson claims that he was out of the country and he was living in Nepal at the time. And Kenny Christensen was a flight attendant who worked for Northwest Orient Airlines, the airline that was skyjacked by D.B. Cooper. And that just begs the question as to why he wasn't recognized by some other D.B. Cooper staff. The risk of doing that would be enormous. It would be almost astronomical to skyjack your own airline and then just resume your life, so to speak. But also, if we're going to focus on the composite sketches, we need to move to Composite B. And this is one that some people might think is the most accurate. And I think hands down, the strongest match to the Composite B sketch is William J. Smith. It really is the only time when I've just been looking at photos of D.B. Cooper suspects where I had that oh my God moment. This guy looks like D.B. Cooper. I just like, and the reason why I think is because of the eyes. And the eyes, the cheekbones, and everything is in proportion. I was really trying to find a better synonym for that, but the proportions are just all in place. Now, some of you guys did point out in the William J. Smith episode that I did here on Black Box Online Radio that, okay, he does have a much larger nose as well. And I was saying, well, there are two parts of your body that are going to keep growing for the entirety of your life, your ears and your nose. And the famous photo of William J. Smith that gets used in the composite comparisons was at least 13 years after the D.B. Cooper skyjacking. And someone wrote into the comment section just saying, your nose isn't going to grow that much in 13 years. His nose really is too big. Now, that doesn't completely eliminate somebody as D.B. Cooper. There are some strong points for William J. Smith to be D.B. Cooper. He worked with the locomotives and the railroad industries, so he has perhaps an explanation as to how and why there were metallic particles that were found on D.B. Cooper's tie that was left behind. And also, he is somebody who perhaps would have been able to pass off the gentleman-like qualities and character very easily, and there were certain issues with the railroad that was affecting his life and financial status, and D.B. Cooper said that he had a grudge. There are things that do tie William J. Smith to this, but I was contacted by the daughter of William J. Smith, and anybody can write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio at AOL.com, and his daughter wrote to me and just said flat out that she is aware of this. And without a lot of specific details, she just said, no, there's no way that my father was D.B. Cooper, and I guess the family doesn't believe it too well. But there's another D.B. Cooper suspect out there named Milton Vordal. And Milton Vordal is one of the older D.B. Cooper suspects. He was 58 years old at the time of the skyjacking. But the most famous photo that has been shared of Milton Vordal is his passport picture that was taken in 1969, when he would have been approximately 56 years old, give or take. And there are some similarities to Milton Vordal and Composite B, but I fully admit that there are differences as well, because he was another suspect that I said matches a lot of different features of the different composites. He is somebody who looks a little bit like Composite A, a little bit like Composite B, and just one or two details from Composite C. But the more I look at Milton Vordal's sketches, it also becomes somewhat apparent that that would mean he doesn't truly match any of the composites. Now, you could just say, well, the combined composite would be the most valuable one, but D.B. Cooper was also estimated to have been around 44 years old. Milton Vordal would have been 58 years old, so definitely on the older side. And when I was listening to the interview with Ryan Burns on the channel Planet X Filmworks, he openly stated that somebody like Milton Vordal could have been wearing makeup or something to make himself appear younger, age-altering makeup, and then you can see that Milton Vordal doesn't completely match the physical descriptions. Last week on the channel, I was talking to you guys about Robert Rackstraw, and he is the suspect of the case breakers. Tom Colbert has a book out about him called The Last Master Outlaw, and I think that there is just some type of misunderstandings that people have, because when I was reading one of the reasons why people think that Robert Rackstraw was D.B. Cooper is because he resembles the physical descriptions. And when I look at Robert Rackstraw compared to the other sketches, I really don't see a very strong resemblance to any of them. And when you look at Composite B, there is a slight resemblance. However, Robert Rackstraw was 28 years old at the time of the skyjacking, and I just think that Composite B looks like a guy in his mid-40s, which has been attributed to that. So was this guy 28 or 58? I mean, those are the extremes that we're dealing with, and this really is like the Zodiac Killer mystery, where the youngest suspects I've encountered were 17 years old, and the oldest ones were up in their early 60s. So it's not quite that extreme, but 28 and 58, well, how old was this guy? And this is something else, though, that I would like people to weigh in on. Do you think there are any similarities between Robert Rackstraw and the composite sketches? Because I'm just not seeing them. However, one suspect that does heavily resemble Composite B is Joe Lacakge, and he is somebody who, at first, I went in with a large amount of enthusiasm, and I was thinking, there really could be a chance that this guy is D.B. Cooper. It's one that was requested by you guys in the comment section, and I think that Joe Lacakge matches some of the aspects of Composite A and Composite B, not Composite C, though, which I'll talk about in a second. And Joe Lacakge is also somebody who would have had a very clear motive to commit the D.B. Cooper skyjacking. His daughter was murdered in a skyjacking attempt, which is more or less referred to simply as 58 November, which happened relatively shortly before the skyjacking. I mean, not like the day before or anything. And I mean, in the months and weeks prior to the D.B. Cooper skyjacking. So this is somebody who just had a grudge, clear motive, wants to make a mockery of the FBI, make a mockery of just aviation, someone who is pissed off and doesn't care what happens to him. All of that falls into place. And I mean, I invite you guys to check out my episode and also watch the videos that were made by Bill Rollins about his suspect, Joe Lacakge. And one of the things I thought was so valuable was when he talked about how and why D.B. Cooper could have committed the skyjacking. Why would be the motive, but how was that he was jumping out of the plane, and he used a hydroelectric dam as a guiding point, and that's how it was like a point of reference when he's jumping through the air. That's how he was able to jump at night, and that he actually landed either in the Lewis River or very close to the Lewis River, perhaps actually in the Lewis River, and there was a boat that was stationed nearby, and he got in the boat and took the boat to the Columbia River, and that's where 3 stacks of bills fell out, and that's why somebody was able to find the 3 stacks of bills at Tina Bar years later. So Joe Lacakge was also an electrical engineer, so he was somebody who might have had metallic particles on his tie. D.B. Cooper left the tie behind on the plane. He was somebody who perhaps would have pulled off an event such as that. And also, I mean, just the fact that no matter whom your D.B. Cooper suspect is, I can comprehend about how they would jump out of the plane and have the boat stationed on the Lewis River. And there are reasons why Bill Rollins says this. It's because they've done analyses on the water, they've analyzed diatoms that would be found from the Lewis River and the Columbia River, and they've compared them, and they believe that the money was in the Lewis River first, or at the very least, we should say that there were diatoms from the Lewis River that were also found. So there are lots of explanations that could tie Joe Lacakge to this. But I remember, though, when I was reading the descriptions of Kenny Christensen as a D.B. Cooper suspect, even earlier today, and one of the strikes against him was there was no hard evidence to connect him to the D.B. Cooper case. And I was thinking, well, with most of these suspects, there isn't a lot of hard evidence to connect them. And this is something that we just encounter in these unsolved mysteries. The Zodiac Killer, D.B. Cooper, Jack the Ripper. And that is that, well, if we had fingerprints at multiple different locations, and they were all matched to a single person, then most likely there wouldn't be a mystery anymore. That's why it's an unsolved case, because the physical evidence has either been destroyed, it's not there, or it hasn't been matched to anyone. If you were able to connect somebody to the physical evidence, it's not a mystery anymore. And as I've said from just the examples that I've listed off, sometimes the cases go unsolved for decades, if not centuries. And if you want to follow along with these discussions about the Zodiac Killer, Jack the Ripper, and D.B. Cooper, you can hit the like button and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. You can also go through some of the links in the description box. One of them is for BuyMeACoffee.com. BuyMeACoffee.com/BlackBoxNed88 allows you to make a donation or contribution to help support the show, and anybody who makes a donation will get a shout out on Zodiac Monday. And I would like to talk about Composite C right now. And this relates to the D.B. Cooper suspect Ted Braden, because even though I think somewhat highly of Ted Braden as a D.B. Cooper suspect, and perhaps you guys could tell if you heard my standalone episode on him, I still had to admit that I really didn't think he matched the physical descriptions enormously, with specific regard to the facial analysis and the composite sketches. I didn't see an overwhelming resemblance because, as I said, I've interviewed Jeremy Berthume, not only about his suspect Kenny Christensen, but we also did a follow-up Q&A session where he had the opportunity to talk about just the comments that you guys had left. One thing he said about Ted Braden was that Ted Braden seems like he has a very large nose, and it's just something that doesn't seem to be found in the D.B. Cooper composites. Not in Composite A, not in Composite B, not in the initial sketch, but there is Composite C, which was drawn from the memories of Florence Schaffner, one of the flight attendants who interacted with D.B. Cooper on the plane, and Florence Schaffner's Composite C, was used for an episode of Unsolved Mysteries in the 1980s. So this is well over a decade after she encountered D.B. Cooper, and I mean, that brings into the reliability question of, how well does somebody remember something? I don't remember what I had for breakfast. You're going to remember what somebody looked like more than 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 17 years ago, but it is possible. And I've also found that some people, sometimes you can meet somebody once and then you see them 2 months later, and they actually have certain different things about their physical appearance that you don't quite recall exactly, or maybe how you visualize them in their mind. In your mind, you might not remember them 100%. The human memory is terrible. And here's another point. Composite C does not resemble the other 2 sketches at all that I've been talking about, A and B. I really think Composite C is very different. Most notably is that it has a receding hairline, and it's almost like a widow's peak, except it's very, very intense. And in Composite C, the person has a much larger nose, and this looks the most like Ted B. Braden. He resembles Composite C more so than any of the other composites. And if you'd like to dispute that, you can put your ideas on the comment section down below. Do you think that Ted Braden resembles these sketches? Do you think that other people resemble the sketches more so? And there is going to be another D.B. Cooper suspect that I will talk about in the future named Richard McCoy. And I haven't done a single standalone episode on him yet, so I'm going to withhold some comments, but that'll probably be worked into the cards very early on here on Cooper Friday. And as previously stated in some other episodes, I am a newcomer to this, so this is just a fresh set of eyes on this very old game. But what do you think about any of my observations so far? And I will leave you with one thing. There is the age-altered composite sketch of D.B. Cooper. And this is one of the only sketches that I think actually resembles the D.B. Cooper suspect Wolfgang Gossett. And my takeaway is that, Wolfgang Gossett does have some similarities to the other composites. A few similarities. I mean, he is a Caucasian male with dark brown hair, but it's not spot on. None of the things are spot on with Wolfgang Gossett. With the age-enhanced composite sketch, I think that it looks a lot more like him than the resemblance to any of the younger sketches. And that's one that I'll probably get a lot of pushback for, that in the comments about Walter Recca. But ultimately, I don't think that Walter Recca is entertained very highly as a D.B. Cooper suspect. And this episode was mostly meant to focus on facial similarities to the composite sketches, as opposed to the other types of evidence. You can talk about all types of reasons about why you think that Sheridan Peterson or Kenny Christensen was not D.B. Cooper, or even about some of the other suspects mentioned, Joe Lacakge and Milton Vordahl and Ted Braden, and anybody else has been covered in this episode. But the point is, there are similarities among them, and there are some people that look extremely different. And I do stand by my claim that at least one of these sketches is probably going to be fairly accurate. But also, I'd like to know, are there any other D.B. Cooper suspects that you would like discussed here on Cooper Friday? And the D.B. Cooper suspect list gets larger and larger, especially when people start entertaining certain far-out suspects like John Emil List, who was a family annihilator, and he just was a criminal who was on the run at the time, but he ultimately denied any and all involvement with the D.B. Cooper case, and to say that he had nothing to do with it. But then, are you going to listen to a criminal or not? And I just want to know, are there any other aspects of the D.B. Cooper mystery that you would like discussed here on Cooper Friday? Maybe things about the FBI and CIA cover-ups. And I'm going to have to get there soon. I mean, there's a book out there called D.B. Cooper and the FBI, and I would love to just do a giant book discussion on that. Books are always welcome. And this is one thing that I want to do with BuyMeACoffee.com. Any money that is donated to the show via BuyMeACoffee.com for the foreseeable future is going to be put right into true crime books, so I can talk to you guys about them here on Black Box Online Radio. Anything is appreciated. And I will see you over on Zodiac Monday. Anybody can write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio at AOL.com. You can also get me on Facebook. My personal Facebook is in the description box. And there was always BlackBoxNed88 on Instagram. Until next time.